$145,000 a year. Benefits: a title that finally sounds like something. Floor-to-ceiling glass on the 14th floor, your name on a Slack channel with 37 people in it, a coffee machine in the kitchen that costs more than your first car. You made it. You tell people you made it. You say it casually, the way you say it, when you want people to understand that you don't need help anymore, that you figured it out, that the version of you who checked the bank app at midnight out of habit and dread is gone now. But it is a Tuesday at 2:47 in the afternoon, and you just did the math, and the math did something to you. Not immediately, not dramatically, it just sat in your chest, the way a cold stone sits, and you haven't fully named it yet. You will by the end of this. You are 34 years old, maybe 31, maybe 38. The age doesn't matter as much as the number of years you've been inside the thing. You have a salary that would have seemed like an answer when you were 22. You have a job title you once typed into a notes app as a goal. You have the apartment that matches the title, the wardrobe, the gym membership you use, the restaurant where you go on Saturday when you want to feel like your life is exactly what it looks like from the outside. And it is fine, genuinely fine. Nobody is suffering, nobody is drowning. That's the problem. Fine is the most dangerous place to be, because fine doesn't require you to do anything. Fine is a temperature where nothing changes because there is no pressure to change. Fine is comfortable enough that you don't move, and still enough that you don't notice the walls. This is the stability trap. You are not struggling. You are not broke. You are not in crisis. You are in something quieter and harder to name. You are in a life that is optimized for performing well inside a system that was never actually designed for you to leave. Let's run the numbers the way you ran them on that Tuesday. Your salary is $145,000. After federal and state taxes, after the 401k contribution that feels responsible, after health insurance and the other deductions you stopped reading about 2 years ago, you take home somewhere around $7,800 a month. That number used to feel enormous. It doesn't feel enormous now. Rent or mortgage, $3,100. Because you live somewhere, the salary is reasonable, and those places are not cheap. Car payment and insurance, $780. The gym, the subscriptions, the streaming bundle, the apps you use once a week, and the ones you never use but haven't canceled, $340. Groceries and the kind of eating out that comes with a life at this pace, $900. The dry cleaning, the work clothes that need to look the part, the haircut that is not a cheap haircut because you are now the kind of person who meets with clients, $280. You are at $5,400 before you have bought a single thing that was a choice rather than a requirement. You have $2,400 left. You are saving $1,100 of it. You are spending the rest on what your therapist might call lifestyle maintenance and what you would call just living. You run the number forward. At $1,100 a month, in 10 years, with reasonable market returns, you have somewhere between $200,000 and $240,000 saved. You stare at that number. Not because it's terrible, because it's not enough. Not for what you're trading for it. This is the first thing the math told you, the first rule. Income is not the same as options. A high salary without a low enough burn rate is just a larger cage with better lighting. Now run the other number, not savings, exposure. If your income stopped tomorrow, how long does your life continue without changing? Not continue fine, just continue at the level where nothing structurally breaks. Where the rent is paid, the car is there, the lights are on. You do the math. You have 3 months of expenses liquid, maybe 4 if you stretch. After that, the 401k, which you can access early with a penalty and a tax bill that makes you feel physically sick to calculate. After that, the credit card. You have a $145,000 salary, a title, a floor-to-ceiling window, and 90 days before the whole structure requires a decision you are not positioned to make on your terms. You are not free, you are rented, not by the company, by the lifestyle. The company is just where you go to pay for it. Let me tell you about Marcus. Marcus is a senior manager at a consulting firm. He is 41. He has been inside the machine since he was 26. He makes $190,000 a year. He has a daughter in a private school that costs $28,000 annually, a mortgage on a house in a neighborhood that the salary made possible and the salary is required to keep, and a self-image that was built piece by piece over 15 years of performance reviews and LinkedIn endorsements and dinners where the account was expensed and it felt like a signal that you were the kind of person who goes to dinners like this. Marcus is not unhappy. That's the thing about Marcus that's hard to explain to people outside the machine. He is not suffering. He has a good life by almost every visible metric. But if you sit with Marcus after the third drink at the conference, he didn't choose to attend, but is very good at attending, and you ask him the question, you get the answer. The question is, when did you last do something at work because you actually wanted to? Marcus pauses, not because he doesn't have an answer, because the answer requires him to go further back than he expected, and going further back than he expected is uncomfortable in a specific way that he hasn't named out loud before. He says, 7 years, maybe 8. He finishes the drink. He orders another one. He does not elaborate. You do not push. You both understand what was just said. That is what the stability trap actually costs. Not money, time, self, the slow substitution of performance for presence until you can no longer tell the difference between what you want and what reads well in a review. Here is what nobody tells you about reaching the salary you once dreamed about. The number feels like a rival. For approximately 1 season, maybe 1 year, and then it becomes the floor, and the floor becomes the minimum, and the minimum becomes the thing your whole life is now calibrated around protecting. You got the salary, and then you built a life that requires the salary. You didn't intend to. You just did what made sense at each increment. A better apartment when the rent bump felt manageable. A nicer car when the old one needed replacing anyway, and the payment was just a little higher. A neighborhood that matched the title, because the title came with a certain kind of social gravitational pull, and it's hard to resist living like the person others now assume you are. And then one day, you sit down on a Tuesday afternoon and do the math and realize that the life you built is not a life you could leave. Not because you don't want to, because you literally cannot afford to, at least not without dismantling everything that signals who you've become to the people who knew you when you were becoming it. The cage is not the job. The cage is the identity that the job paid for. The second rule, the lifestyle is not what you built. The lifestyle is what's building you now, whether you notice it or not. There is a thing that happens inside the machine that I want to name precisely, because it is the thing that makes this hard to talk about in rooms where people have the same problem. You start performing for the camera instead of for the work, not dishonestly. This is not about fraud or pretending you know things you don't. It is subtler than that. It is the meeting where you say the thing you know will land well instead of the thing you actually think. The decision you make because it aligns with what your boss's boss said in the all hands, not because it's correct. The project you put your name on because it is visible, not because it needs doing. The email you send at 10:30 at night, not because the work required it, but because the read receipt does something for you. You are optimizing for the signal of contribution rather than the substance of it. And nobody sees the difference. Your performance reviews are excellent. Your colleagues respect you. Your LinkedIn is current and slightly curated. The machine rewards the signal because the signal is easier to measure than the substance. And organizations, even good ones, tend to measure what is easy. But you see it. That is what Tuesday afternoon was about. That is what the math uncovered, not just the financial fragility underneath the salary. The other thing, the realization that you have been very good at a performance you never auditioned for and are no longer sure you want the run to continue. Now, here is the thing I don't want to skip past, because it matters. The stability trap is real, but it is not a moral failure. You did not do something wrong by wanting security. You did not do something wrong by building a life that matched the income you earned. You did not do something wrong by caring what it looks like from the outside, because caring about that is human, and the culture you grew up in told you repeatedly and specifically that the title and the floor-to-ceiling glass were the goal. The trap is not your fault. It is, however, your problem. And the difference between those two sentences is everything. Because fault looks backward and assigns blame. Problem looks forward and asks what you do next. There is a woman I want you to think about. Her name is Elena. She is 36. She was a senior director at a mid-sized tech company, making $172,000. She ran the same Tuesday math 3 years ago. She did not leave immediately. She did not blow up her life in one afternoon. She did something different. She started building a perimeter, not dramatically, not with a resignation letter. She found 1 hour on Sunday mornings, and she used it for something that was not the job. First, it was a newsletter she wrote and sent to 11 people. Then, it was 40 people. Then, it was 400. Then, a company offered her $2,000 to write something for them. Then, another one offered $3,500. The newsletter became a consultancy, became a thing she chose to call a business, even though, for a long time, it felt like it barely deserved the word. She did not quit until the perimeter was wide enough to stand on. 2 years after the Tuesday math, she left. Not in crisis, not after a layoff, not because something broke, because she had built enough outside the machine that the machine was no longer load-bearing. That is the only exit that works, not escape. Perimeter. The third rule, you don't leave the golden cage by running. You leave by building a door, one Sunday at a time, until the door is real enough to walk through. So what do you do with Tuesday? You don't quit on Tuesday. That is not the lesson here. What you do on Tuesday is something smaller and more important. You decide to stop confusing salary with security, because they are not the same thing. Salary is a number that comes in monthly on the condition that you continue performing inside a system someone else controls. Security is a number that keeps coming, regardless of whether you show up to perform. You don't have security yet. You have salary. And salary that funds a lifestyle that requires the salary is not a foundation. It's a dependency. So you run 2 numbers, not 1. The first number is your monthly burn rate, and you find it honestly, not the way you find it when you're feeling good about yourself, but the way you find it on a Tuesday when the math is cold. The second number is your monthly freedom threshold, the minimum amount of income from anywhere other than the job that would make the job a choice rather than a requirement. It doesn't have to be the full salary. It rarely is at first. It just has to be enough that the machine no longer owns the decision. For Elena, it was $4,000 a month. For Marcus, it might be $6,000. For you, it's a number you have not yet calculated because calculating it would make it real, and making it real would require you to start moving. And starting to move means admitting that the floor-to-ceiling glass was a beautiful cage, and you have been grateful for it, and you are also ready to leave. Here is where it gets honest. Most people who run the Tuesday math do not change anything. Not because they don't want to, because the math is uncomfortable, and discomfort, by definition, is something the human brain is designed to reduce as efficiently as possible. The easiest way to reduce the discomfort of a number is to close the spreadsheet and go back to what you were doing before. The job is still there. The salary is still depositing. The apartment still has good light. Nothing is on fire. The brain relaxes. The math goes quiet. Tuesday becomes Wednesday, becomes a month, becomes a year. And then you do the math again, on a different Tuesday. And the numbers are slightly worse or slightly better in the wrong ways. And the cage is the same cage it was before. And it is a little harder to leave because now there is more invested in it. More identity, more time, more of you. That is the cost of the closed spreadsheet. It is not dramatic. It is not a catastrophe. It is a Tuesday you did not use. And then another one. The fourth rule. The machine is not doing anything to you. The machine is just running. You are the one who decides whether you stay in it because you chose to or because you forgot to choose. So here is where I land. Not with an answer, with a question, and the question is the most important thing in this whole thing. What would you do if the job was not load-bearing? Not what would you do if you won the lottery? Not what would you do in a fantasy without constraints? What would you do if your income was $5,000 a month from something other than the 14th floor, and the job was therefore optional, and the salary was therefore a bonus, and the performance review was therefore just feedback with no existential weight attached to it? Because that version of you makes completely different decisions. That version of you says the thing in the meeting that is actually true. That version of you works on the project that needs doing rather than the one that photographs well. That version of you is not performing for anyone. That version of you is just doing the work, and the work is worth doing, and that is enough. That version of you exists. It is not a fantasy. It is a function of the perimeter you have or have not built. Elena built hers. It took 2 years. It required 1 Sunday morning per week for 104 weeks. It required saying no to things that were comfortable and yes to things that were uncertain and small. It required tolerating the specific discomfort of being bad at something new while being excellent at something old. And the gap between those two feelings is where most people stop. She did not stop. And one Tuesday morning, 3 years after her Tuesday, she submitted a resignation that felt like a door she had been building for a long time, finally swinging open. You are not behind. The math on Tuesday was not a verdict, it was a coordinate. The same way $1,247 is a coordinate, not a judgment. It tells you where you are. It does not tell you what you are capable of from here. The cage is real. The gold is real. The comfort is real, and the comfort is earned, and the comfort is also something you are allowed to want less than freedom. You can hold both. You can be grateful for the floor-to-ceiling glass and clear-eyed about what it costs you to stay inside it. That is not ingratitude. That is not recklessness. That is the specific kind of honesty that Tuesday afternoons are for. Close the deck, put the laptop down, but before you do, open one document, one page, and write the number, the freedom threshold, the number that would make the job a choice. Write it down. Don't calculate a plan yet. Don't figure out how. Just write the number, because the number makes it real, and real is where everything starts. It always does.